15 and 16, and just get Natasha and Lara to come forward. And we also have members from Te Ahiwaru, Kōwhai and Sophia. Thank you very much for attending. Kia ora. And if the three of you were able to introduce yourselves to the committee, and just might want to explain I know the presentation's sort of together, but how are we taking it as one item or two? That'll just be, if you want to make that clear. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko Natasha Carpenter toko ingoa, ko te Coastal Management Practice Lead aho. We're here today to seek approval of the next two shoreline adaptation plans for the Pahurihuri Inlet and the Manukau Harbour East. I'm joined today by Lara Clark, Principal Coastal Adaptation Specialist, and Sophia Olofonga from Te Ahiwaru in support of the Manukau East Shoreline Adaptation Plan. And we also have two of our iwi partners hopefully online, Edith Tuhimata from Ngāti Tamaoho in support of the Pahurihuri and Manukau East Shoreline Adaptation Plan, who sends her apologies for not being here in person. She's a little unwell at the moment. And Kōwhai Olsen from Te Ahiwaru in support of Manukau East as well, who unfortunately has been a little bit delayed and should hopefully be online also. I will hand over to our iwi partners shortly just to share a few thoughts in support of their plans, and Lara has a brief presentation overview as well. Just before we do, a few overarching points. So today marks the next two in our regional series of shoreline adaptation plans that we're seeking approval for. So I think this is plans 6 and 7 out of the series of 20. We're moving towards the accelerated completion of the whole of the region by the midterm of next year. The model for the development of the shoreline adaptation plans has been set through the earlier plans, including the pilots, and the scope aligns with that was originally set following the Coastal Management Framework and the direction from the then Environment and Climate Change Committee to focus on public-owned land and assets and respond to coastal hazard and climate change risk in these areas. It is also a key implementation piece under Te Taruki Atawhiri, and it's becoming part of an increasingly important piece of work since the storm recovery in 2023. So this is one of the key pieces of work that we have implementing some of our adaptation to coastal hazards and climate change for Council. The team you have in front of you today represents just a small portion, with the work being led through engineering assets and technical advisory and our iwi partners. And I also want to just acknowledge some of our wider council family that we collaborate with in development of these plans, including parks and community facilities, water care, Healthy Waters, Eki Panuku, and Auckland Transport, to name a few, as well as some of the wider council family that's involved in supporting some of the social, cultural, environmental and ecological values of the shoreline adaptation plans, and how this dovetails in with wider policy work across the council group. So through the chair, I would like to again welcome our iwi partners and invite them to share a few words on this mahi if they would like to.
I'll just say a few words because I wasn't actually prepared to say anything. So this kia ora koutou, ko Sophia Olofonga ho no Te Ahiwaru aho. So this has been quite a long process over the last couple of years, and it's been really heartening to see our aspirations captured in a plan like this, and I feel like the council staff, the team, has really listened and been open to our concerns and our aspirations. That's all I have to really say. But our focus is always about our mokopuna and our mokopuna. So to ensure that this plan thinks about them and their futures is important to us. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Sophia. Thank you so much.
Kia ora tātou, ko Lara Clark tōku ingoa. I can't see whether Edith or Kowhai have been able to join us online, so I will come to our presentation now. First of all, ngā mihi, thank you very much, Sophia, for your words. It's been a real privilege working with yourself and all of our iwi partners on the development of these two plans. So hopefully this is going to play ball for me. So in terms of just a quick recap and refresh on the purpose and scope of the shoreline adaptation plans, it's really in response to our dynamic and changing environment, the coastal hazards that we face, and what they are predicted to do in terms of climate change and sea level rise. As we know, our coastal areas are hugely important to us. It's where we live, it's where we work, it's where we play. They have really high cultural, social and ecological significance. And so in terms of the purpose of the program, it's around sustainable coastal management for these areas, but also around putting in place a long-term strategic plan which helps guide decision-making across a really wide range of assets that Auckland Council is responsible for in our coastal areas. In terms of our alignment across the Auckland Council sort of family and with our national direction, we look first of all to national direction around climate change and coastal hazards and follow some of the processes set out in the Ministry for the Environment's Coastal Hazard and Climate Change Guidance. We're also guided by the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement at that national scale. At a more local or regional scale, we have the Coastal Management Framework adopted in 2017 by Auckland Council and Te Tarukua Tāwhiri, Auckland's Climate Plan, and specifically in relation to our coasts and communities themes there. With policy alignment across a lot of the other fantastic mahi that Auckland Council is involved with, we look to our Natural Hazard Risk Management Action Plan, our water strategy, and our various asset management plans right across the council family. We're also working really closely with Resilient Tāmaki Makaurau and the Recovery Office in terms of some of the more recent work in that space. So moving to the Manukau Harbour East Shoreline Adaptation Plan and the Pahurihuri Inlet Shoreline Adaptation Plan. This presentation will address both of those plans together, and I am advised that the vote will be separate. So please bear with me in terms of moving through both of the plans. So in terms of scoping and development, as Sophia has identified, we started back in early 2023 with gathering all of our supporting research and development for these two shoreline adaptation plan areas. Through the middle of the year, we moved through comprehensive community engagement. And through the last part of the year, we've been working really closely with our program partners, our asset owners, to develop the plans that you have in front of you today. So in terms of this process, it's really important that we acknowledge that this is really our first step in adaptation planning and thinking about this longer term roadmap for change in response to sea level rise. They are living documents and they're non-statutory documents. Climate change and sea level rise pose a real challenge for us, but also an opportunity, and we need to be dynamic as our environments are in terms of the way we respond. And finally, and importantly, they're applicable to council-owned land and assets, and that is a scope that we are focused on and being good stewards for our land and assets throughout the region. Now, in developing the plans, it's going to move to the next slide. Apologies, there we go. In developing the plans, we've had the great privilege to work with a number of iwi partners across the region, and I'd really like to take this moment to acknowledge all the mahi, all of the hui and the hikoi, and the kōrero that's been shared with our team. It's been a real privilege to better understand the Manukau Harbour and the Pahurihuri area. You'll see that reflected in the plans, and we also have the guidance of the Infrastructure Environmental Services Mana Whenua Forum and guiding principles there as well. I'd just like to also acknowledge that when we're thinking about climate change and adaptation in our coastal areas, taking a sort of te ao Māori view approach, that holistic approach and a long-term approach is really important in terms of this program and mahi. In terms of our community engagement, we've had a great opportunity to engage with diverse communities across both of these shoreline adaptation plan areas, with our councillors and with our local board members along the way. We've had a number of in-person events across the Shoreline Adaptation Plan area where we've had lots of different forums for engagement, and we've had a really good response as well online in terms of interactive mapping tools and feedback that we've received, and also really detailed and extensive submissions from some of our community groups, which has been a real privilege to receive as well. So finally, coming to our specific shoreline adaptation plan areas, I'd just like to sort of provide a little bit of framing in terms of the documents that you have in front of you. First of all, looking at the Manukau Harbour East area, we've got some really significant council land holdings in this area, such as the Puhinui Reserve, our Watercare waterfront and wastewater treatment plants, our regional parks, the Onehunga Port, and some key areas of the Mangere Inlet where we have reclamations and we look after closed landfills in these areas as well. So when we look at this area and we look at the strategies, we have quite a number of areas within the Manukau Harbour East Shoreline Adaptation Plan where we identify holding the line over all timeframes. Now, just to identify a few of these areas, a real focus around in the north, the Onehunga Port and the Mangere Inlet, where we do have these reclaimed areas and really significant connections to the harbour. As we move south, we've got areas around the Mangere Bridge foreshore. We have our Watercare wastewater treatment facility and the Watercare waterfront. This is also the home to some regenerating and restored catchments, the Oruarangi catchment, and really important environmental and cultural heritage in these areas also. If we then look to our limited intervention strategy and where we need to be thinking about making better decisions to manage risk through design and location of assets, we also identify two areas here where we collaborate with partners in terms of the management of the Pukaki Lagoon and Te Motua Hiaroa Pukitutu Island. When we're thinking about managed retreat, or we're thinking about the need to look further at adaptation action, and we're thinking in the mid to long term where we may have 0.5 metre or a metre plus of sea level rise, we identify several areas where this needs to be a real focus and thought for us. And these areas here, again moving from the north to the south, we have the Onehunga Lagoon and other areas of our Mangere Bridge foreshore. We also identify two of the catchments where we've been working closely with our Making Space for Water colleagues, and that's the Te Ararata and the Harania Creek areas. As we move towards Te Motua Hiaroa and the causeway there, some further discussion and thinking in that area. And as we move south, looking at Puhinui, with some really significant ecological opportunities to consider for adaptation there. Now, if I bring us further south to the Pahurihuri Inlet, just acknowledging that we've got a diverse range of land use in this area and some very well-established residential areas and some really key coastal connections. We first think about holding the line and the areas that we identify within the Pahurihuri area. So we have those key coastal connections and already developed areas, and we also have areas where we've got really important coastal connections for our wider community. And identifying some of those on the map for you, around the Weymouth area, we've got key coastal areas and reserves around Conifer Grove and Karaka Harbourside as we move further south to the Hangaia area there. When we think about limited intervention and we think about no active intervention, we have a number of areas where we can better manage risk to our land and assets through location and design and better decision making around our infrastructure. And that's identified for a number of areas across the Pahurihuri Inlet Shoreline Adaptation Plan. And finally, looking at managed retreat and some of the challenges that we might face in these areas. We have an area known as Waikirihino or Bottletop Bay. We have an area of Drury Creek and one of the catchments there. We have Young's Point, and we have the western lower lying areas of our Weymouth Peninsula, where we identify that looking again at that 0.5 metre to 1 metre sea level rise, we have some challenges and potentially some opportunities to really look at nature-based solutions. I'd like to pause here also to really acknowledge some of the feedback we've had from communities and we've had from iwi around the need to think about our resilience of infrastructure, about managing things like discharges and ultimately managing the water quality of the Manukau Harbour. And also acknowledging some of the key transport links that we have that traverse this area. So we've got key transport connections through Karaka, which service our coastal communities further to the west, which are really important to acknowledge as well. So finally, implementation. Now you have these plans before you, what will we be doing to implement them? Right from when the plans have been finalised, we can start to look at better decision making today. So that's what you see on the left of the screen in front of you. That's through a number of our business as usual processes around our local parks planning, around our renewal programs and our asset management. From 2025, where we look to have all of our shoreline adaptation plans across the region completed, we'll be able to take a regional view of our risk profile and think further about prioritisation and the funding that might be required to support implementation there. So thank you. That's my slides for today. I can see that Kōwhai has joined us online. So I will pause there and pass back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. I really don't know how, considering during this you're also on the shore in meetings doing quite different coasts with such very different things going on. So I can't quite see how you understand all parts of the coast and the team in such a thorough way. You know, it's pretty phenomenal to see the work you're all doing. So thank you. Kōwhai, don't want to put you on the spot. Sophia has already spoken, but if you would like to address the committee, you can. But please don't feel you have to. I just want to make sure that thank you for joining us. But if you'd like to speak on any of the process.
Thank you. No, I won't add any more. But thank you to the team for coming and presenting to today. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it there in person, but no, still listening online. Thank you.
No need to apologise at all. Thank you for coming in, Kōwhai. Kia ora. Right, we'll go first to questions. Councillor Newman.
Good morning and thank you for the work. My questions relate to the proposed shoreline adaptation plan for the Pahurihuri Inlet. I agree with a lot of this. The question that I had was that we're proposing a hold the line strategy for harbour side, which I agree with. The prevailing coastal processes and wind effects north of the Karaka Harbour side primarily affects the north side of Pauriko Island, which we are not proposing a hold the line approach, even though there are going to be quite significant coastal assets and amenity in that location. Why the distinction, noting that the island, which is being developed now for residential, is actually more exposed given its location within the inlet? That's my first question. The second question is there's a causeway linking Pauriko Island and Kopua Hingahinga Island just to the south, which is the one road thoroughfare linking up into Pauriko, but we are not looking to do a hold the line at that particular location. Is there any reason why we're making the distinction there?
Kia ora. Through the chair, thank you for your question. I can speak to definitely the first part on Pauriko Island, and Lara may have some more detail to add on the causeway. For Pauriko Island, I was actually directly involved in the subdivision application there, so can share a bit more detail in terms of the process that we went through for the vesting of the Esplanade Reserve. So typically through the RMA, we're offered a 20 metres Esplanade Reserve. Through the process of that subdivision application, we were able to gain a much wider width of Esplanade Reserve. So we've got a variable width from 22 up to close to 60 metres along the exposed frontage of Parariko Island. So you're absolutely right, that is more exposed. The original application came with the vesting of a extensive 600 metre long rock revetment wall that would be vested to council, along with the maintenance and the ongoing obligation to maintain and renew that structure. So in a line with what you're seeing reflected in the SAP, we were able to go with a more naturalised frontage and provide that additional buffer. So the shoreline adaptation plan is reflective of that process in that we do have that wider Esplanade buffer and the ability within that buffer to set the assets back. And then I would add that these are, of course, non-statutory living documents. So if there are changes beyond what we've predicted in terms of those coastal hazard assessments that were done specifically for that development, there is the ability to do that in the future.
Okay with it.
So in terms of the causeway and the strategy of limited intervention there, through the chair, we're looking with limited intervention and a focus on design and location of assets and acknowledging that the coastline is not fixed. The causeway providing that really important transport link would sit within that limited intervention in terms of the design options that might achieve the risk management to that connection. But as Natasha has identified, if any further changes to strategies in that area would be required over time with how we see the environment changing, that can certainly be adopted as necessary.
Okay, well, Chair, look, those are very, very good answers, and I thank you for that. My one other question then, if I may, at Cody Point and Wattle Downs, we are proposing no active intervention. I agree with that. But for the fact that there are some enormous pine trees which are right on the coastline, when they fall over, and they do, they just tear away the coastline itself, and quite frankly, there is very little or no amenity value in those, pines that are collapsing, and frankly, sometimes it would actually be quite useful just to chainsaw them up and get them out of there rather than having them tear away at the coastline itself. So is that something that you've considered, or is that beyond your brief?
So looking at the Cody Point stretch and the current ownership of those areas, it was our best information that still sits within private ownership. So in that case, we don't have council-owned land identified in that area. As living documents, if we need to think about how those strategies change, if we have further assets which are coming onto council's books, if you will, and think about the actions that we might need to take there, then we can provide updates to the documents as needed.
Yeah, Chair, I'll take that offline because the area of Cody Point that I'm referring to is all council reserve.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've got ancient old pine trees right on the edge which are crashing into the harbour, and they just take the coastline with it. That's my point, but I'll take that offline. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor, and I did actually take Paul Kleinak to a different Cody Point area on the shore for similar reasons, and there is a discussion going on with community facilities about what our long-term strategy is for these wilding pines, which are right across our coastlines and harbours, so we could latch into that. Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. First, just want to acknowledge you, Sophia. Kia ora, and Kōwhai Online, just acknowledging Te Ahi Waru, taking the time to come up and support this. So kia ora. Also, thank you to the staff for working so closely with iwi. My question is, are there any opportunities arising out of this, noting the limitation as to council assets, but are there any opportunities coming out of this to support iwi planning document, updates along the coastal area through this process? So can you use this process to support iwi in other ways? And could that also have a role, for example, in accelerating the scheduling of relevant coastal sites of significance? Thank you.
Kia ora, Member Ashby, thank you for the question and the acknowledgement. Through the chair, in terms of, I guess, supporting our iwi communities, but supporting all of our communities across Tamaki Makaurau, we have had the opportunity to share a lot of the information around coastal hazards that Auckland Council holds. And I think if we think about adaptive processes and first thinking about what is happening and understanding some of that environmental change, albeit based on Western science, we do have that coastal hazard information which we're able to share, and staff can provide that support as we do to our communities in terms of how to navigate and interpret that information. I'm afraid I can't speak to the second part of your question in relation to the scheduling of further areas.
Kia ora koutou. Member Ashby and members of the committee, you may recall at the joint Haukura governing body meeting a few weeks ago, there was a resolution for staff to report back to the relevant committee on the Sites of Significance to Mana Whenua program and opportunities to, or issues and options around accelerating that program. So we can pick that up as part of that and obviously stay connected with the team here. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is just trying to understand perhaps the financial side of this equation, because we're going out and those coastal works can be extremely expensive. I don't want to end up in a situation where we've identified a whole lot of coastal work that needs to be done and we haven't got the budgets to do it. In fact, they effectively become unfunded projects, so that's the risk. So I think I heard you correctly saying those costings aren't yet decided. You'll be working those out as part of this next step. So you probably can't answer this, but it would be very helpful to have an idea of that big number sooner rather than later. So have you got a feel for when we could get that information? And have you got any feel at the moment about how big that number might be?
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Sayers, for your question. Through the chair, I can start us off on this one. So a lot of the intent of developing the shoreline adaptation plans is the recognition that we need a regional picture as to how much adapting to climate change in the future is going to cost, and that the fact that we know we cannot afford to defend everywhere on our 3,200 kilometres of coastline. So a lot of the intention through developing these plans and the strategies in the short, medium and long term is recognising that. Also improving our understanding of what we currently own, what we currently are maintaining and what we're currently renewing, and providing a bit more of a consistent framework as to how we approach our future maintenance and renewals. So we don't have at the moment through this part of the process the picture as to what that's going to cost in the future, but this is really setting that foundation work for where are we recognising a need for hold the line versus where are we recognising an opportunity for moving away or naturalising the coast and moving away from those ongoing maintenance and capital expenditure commitments. The second part of the program as we move into implementation with the completion of the entire region is exactly that. So it is the understanding then of how are we going to equitably understand risk prioritisation around the coast. So we'll have a series of areas where we have identified hold the line that will come under different time frames, and then there's a number of different mechanisms for how we can actually achieve that. So that's all part of the second part, and Lara may like to add to that slightly.
I don't have a lot to add there other than to say in terms of identifying areas for hold the line, it is a reasonably high test in terms of what is the land use we have there, what is the regional value, and what is the usage of those areas. But we also, coming back to that sort of policy framing with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, do need to think about that sustainable coastal management and the values of the environment as well. So yeah, just to affirm that it is a reasonably high test. And once we have been through that regional view, we may need to come back to this committee and have those further conversations.
Thank you for the answer. So do you think this is going to be an annual plan discussion or will be an LTP discussion by the time you have those numbers? Do you think it'll be LTP or? Yeah, we're just trying to work out a time frame, you know?
In terms of timeframes, I would have to come back to you on that, but can provide that advice.
Right, thank you.
Keep in mind, councillor says that the shoreline adaptations were sort of birthed because of we were ad hoc spending on coastal, not ad hoc, but we were sort of being very reactive on coastal spending and sometimes maybe putting in things without a wider strategy. These shoreline adaptation plans are to kind of influence current spending, but also future annual plans, future local board plans, future LTPs, to make sure that we're going, should we be putting something here that might get washed out in 2 years? Should we really be rebuilding this seawall? Should we? And it sort of doesn't lock those in because each individual business case should still be there, but it does start giving direction to the wider team and gives us an idea of the bills we're up for, because we are well behind on our coastal assets, but also it's about making sure we don't keep building in mistakes that we've made in decades or even centuries ago. Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was a bit late, but I have read the stuff. In following along from a bit from Councillor Sayers there, do you ask, as well as how much, but who pays? Because I know it's all good talking to communities and everyone thinks it's wonderful and it has to be dealt with, but there are different benefits to different people, and I don't want this good work to set accidental precedents which are unpayable by others. We have had a couple of unfortunate precedents possibly set in Orewa, where the ratepayer has gifted millions of dollars of property uplift to people nearby who would have gladly paid a targeted rate. So I want to hear, I don't want people to be thinking that there isn't some cost here. And it's not just going to go on people in Mount Albert who don't live near the coast, who are already struggling, or in Otahu, or even Remuera. They might be struggling for all I know, but can I be sure that you are having your discussions along the lines of introducing the thoughts and looking at who benefits? In some cases, there's a broad benefit to everybody. In some cases, there are people who are just sitting behind a fast disappearing reserve that without that thing, their house is going to be worth bugger all, and all of a sudden they're worth millions. They'd be quite happy to contribute. Are you aware of a targeted rate as a tool? Because this is what we do for people who've got drain problems. I myself pay targeted rates to fix stormwater problems in one area and gladly do it along with the people around me. And so my question is, are you absolutely making sure that you're not leading people along to expect a free gift?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I can answer this. So we've had, through the shoreline adaptation plans, it's a very defined scope around public-owned land and assets. So the intention through this, which becomes quite a topic of debate for the private-owned landholders, as to extending this out to protection of their own property. So we've had a very clear scope through the shoreline adaptation plans to maintain that focus on public-owned land and assets. And I completely hear your point around when we have sacrificial reserve buffers that are retreating over time with coastal hazards and climate change. How are we balancing that off to ensure that it's still there for the wider benefit of Aucklanders and not for a select few? And that's where part of the wider piece of the shoreline adaptation plans brings in the social, cultural, economic and environmental values of each area. These are high-level plans, so they're setting that high-level strategic direction. And then, of course, there's a much more pointy end of the conversation to come in terms of implementation to really understand the options that are available there and what specifically are the benefits of holding the line, for example, in a specific location.
Well, that's good. I realise this is high level, but this is a stage where the messages can go seriously wrong. And just because we may be the owner of a sacrificial reserve does not mean that we have to pay for the repair of that without asking for the people immediately behind that to contribute seriously. And we've made a mistake once, and I don't want to see that happen again, because we are representing all ratepayers are happy to chip in for things which are benefit to all ratepayers. But where there's a local advantage, those people should be asked to contribute, and we shouldn't. And so I take it from that that's a yes. Good.
Yeah. Kia ora, Mayor. And yeah, just to be clear, and because we've done so many of these, that we are only talking about council assets. And I know the Orewa one is a curious case, but part of the reason it was, in and out of court for so long was actually many of the residents didn't want, because they felt like the walkway was blocking their access to the beach. There was issues around, they didn't want people walking past the fronts of their houses, things like that. So actually part of the opposition to it was the fact they didn't want the public having access to the front of the beach. So it's always...
Yeah, but on that case, if I may as well finish things, you asked a question on mine. In that case there, if we'd waited a couple of years, we'd got those houses for bugger all. And then we could have put the thing and made a profit. They're making a profit. So just because we own the sacrificial land, the benefit goes beyond that personalised sometimes. So you have to have a look at it that way and just see who is benefiting here. And where it's the public should pay. Where it's private, they should contribute. That's the point.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much, and first of all, thank you for the public meetings you came to in my area. They were big halls full of people, and thank you for standing up in front of them. We're talking here, you talk about a living document, and then we talk about modelling predictions. So this is a real moving beast. And then I heard the comment made about if we're not right with our predictions, and I took the inference as it was worse. What happens if it's less? What I want to know is how this debate affects the maintenance of our existing assets so they're operational for the purpose they were built for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you also, Councillor Turner, for your support in those events. In terms of the question there around if we don't see the rate of change that I guess we're predicting, and if we see slower rates of sea level rise, then I guess I come back to some of the comments I made there in the presentation around limited intervention, which is often what we have in the short term for some of these areas, as being better decision making today. So building in to the design and the location of some of those assets within our current reserves or our current coastal areas, some resilience to that dynamic coastal environment that they might be exposed to, but certainly continuing to maintain them in those locations and continuing to provide those services, but being smarter about how we design them.
Thank you, Councillor. And Sophia, just in case you don't feel obligated, you have to stay if the conversation continues. You're welcome to stay, but just to make sure you're not stuck here for however long the questions and debate take. Member Henare.
Kia ora. Given how successful your fellows mahi has been, and it's taken a while, but it's an exemplar for a whole lot of things. Given the scheduling of sites of significance process is going at a snail's pace, how do you think your mai informs, or how could it speed up the process? Or do you think it could be used to speed up that process?
Kia ora, Member Henare. In response to how can the Shoreline Adaptation Plan program support that process, I think it can support some of the thinking and it can support some of the conversations with iwi, where we have the privilege of sharing that kōrero around sites which may not yet be scheduled. We can start to, explore and have those discussions with iwi around what would we like to see there, what does protection mean, what does adaptation mean. I'm not sure that it, and how it will relate, and perhaps Mr. Dogood might like to comment further in terms of that statutory process, but certainly starting those conversations and spending that time thinking about coastal processes and sea level rise is a really important part of that process. Kia ora.
Yeah, I think John might want to speak, but I think largely our problem is with the statutory process and it's sticking us to these really extreme timelines. But I think you're right, Member Henare, that this information and these relationships building might help some of those intermediary phases where we can go, we already have this information, we don't need to do it again. Here are the details, which may help speed things up a little bit, but largely we get stuck in these plan change that are set not by us. We get stuck in the kind of loop of having to go back and forth through that process. But I think you're right that we should make sure we keep building these relationships and growing the knowledge, especially on the public sites, because the public sites should be far easier than the sites of significance that happen to sit in private land, which is the bigger complication for the statutory side of those sites of significance process. John, did you have anything to add? Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe he mana. Ni Sambula Vinaka. And firstly, pātai to Morena Sofia and Morena Kōwhai online, Morena Korua. Look, my question is this plan from your consultation that you've had with staff, is it something that we, as this committee, should be supporting from your perspective? I'll go to you first, Sophia, and then Kof.
It's a hard spot to put me in, but yes, I think that we should be supporting this plan. It's well thought out and has had engagement across the board with community and mana whenua groups. So it's very considered in the way that it's been written and planned for our future. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe kōwhai, kia koe.
She agrees.
Look, I'm going to move on to the pātai to our staff. And, again, as others have said, just want to acknowledge the work. I've got 3 leading questions. One of them is there's no financial investment decisions in regards to this plan.
Kia ora, through the chair, so that there's no investment decisions through the shoreline adaptation plans beyond what is already set through our regional budgets, so, such as the coastal renewals program. So when work is already identified through that process, it's continuing on. But in terms of what the SAPs are governing through their implementation, there's no financial direction yet set.
You actually asked my second leading question in regards to any work, any budget requirements will come out of existing budgets. So thank you for that. My last one is that, can you tell me how much is allocated in the long-term plan for coastal assets or renewals, please?
I will confirm these figures because they will be coming off the top of my head for now. But for the coastal renewals program, the budget for this financial year is 13 million. And we have a small portion, 1.2 million, I'm going to say, for the shoreline adaptation plan implementation. So as we're moving into looking at capital works to support the SAPs where it's beyond the scope of a traditional like-for-like renewal of an existing asset. I can confirm those numbers after the meeting if that would be helpful.
Would you be surprised, supplementary, would you be surprised if I said that allocated the long-term plan budget for renewals of coastal assets is approximately 41.1 million?
No, so that will be, through the chair, that will be over the next 3 years, yes.
Okay, thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. There are no more questions, I don't think. So we'll just ask members to step back from the table so then we can direct the issue to each other, not through you. Cool. And Councillor Dalton's written in the chat that she would like to move both those items. Do I have a seconder for those? Councillor Filipaina, would you like to move second both? Kia ora. We will debate them together, but we'll actually pass them. I think that's the easiest way, even though it's slightly outside standing orders. But if anyone has comments on either or both plans, Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, having read the reports but also the attachments, it's interesting that from our perspective, this plan needs to be approved and for us to start doing the work. Through the long-term plan, as I pointed out, there is monies in there. The reason I asked our two iwi representatives is because guess who is at the forefront of all of this? Is our iwi, our mana whenua, and our mātāwaka. Because no matter how they're at the forefront of this. And so this is why it's so important for us to end up getting on with the work. As you can see in the report, there's other plans that are going to be coming to us, but for me at the moment, these two here, and in particular the one that reflects not only our Manukau ward, but also Mangukiki and Tamaki, is the reason why this should happen. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. The unintended consequences that the public keep raising at the public meetings I've been at are huge. I won't be supporting this when it comes to my area because that's what the public want. It's clear. So it would be wrong of me to influence this area, which I don't have the intimate understanding of that I do for my own area. It would be wrong of me to vote for or against in this circumstance. So I will be abstaining, and because I wouldn't want to vote for or against for an area I don't understand when I know where I'm going to be on the area that I'm elected to represent foremost. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Good, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is we've been through a lot of this down in my patch, but I look at this more as a regional thing, and that's our job to actually take a regional perspective and stuff. So that's my comment there. Be a sad day when we're just voting on things that affect us in our own patches. But this is tricky because it's about us. It's about us protecting what we have and putting in place a plan that helps us sort of, I guess, avoid issues that we might come up with in the future. And so I think we've got to take these plans and think really hard about them. They are living documents. They will change just as the environment changes. And so I think they're really important. I think just about our entire coast, which is I think the largest coastline in Auckland in terms of a ward, I think we're pretty much sorted now right around East and West Coast. So it's a good thing, and I just want to acknowledge the staff. Sometimes we have to say things and sometimes we have to disagree with what the public tell us. But I just want to acknowledge the staff, having been to a few of the meetings around the place, and the amount of work again that has been undertaken to try and get these plans which can move. They're a movable feast. I like feasts. And so, good work. And it just gives us a little bit more, I guess, to work on in the future when we have to sort of deal with these issues. So good work to the staff. I know it hasn't been easy, and so just nice work.
Kia ora, Councillor Baker. Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and just to acknowledge the staff as well, and also mana whenua, who have put so much into this work. It's really not easy, and there's so many differences, and of course it has to be a living document as our climate changing all of the time. I know when it comes to local areas, and one recent one I've had is a long-term resident from Weymouth really concerned about the erosion on that peninsula that I can't remember if it was Natasha or not, spoke to. It means a lot to people that have been living in a place a very long time and seeing their area erode away and wanting us to take some action. But the plans are absolutely critical, and congratulations to the team to get number 6 and 7 hopefully across the line this morning. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, just briefly, again, these shoreline adaptation plans, for those who don't know, and this is the first time you're hearing about it, they are so important to our work. So we have 3,500 kilometres of coast, and obviously this covers the public side of things. We didn't have any funding for this until the 2021 LTP when we put that in through the Climate Initiatives funding, and is once again supported, thank you Mayor, through the mayoral proposal and through this last LTP that we supported. And it just really does bring those conversations to the fore. After last year with the floods and the storms, we had over 10,000 slips across Auckland, and a lot of that was on our coast. And this does help communities hopefully feel less anxious, mana whenua, to tell the stories and bring back those discussions for hundreds of years of what's been happening to our coast and how we can either A, protect it, or let the coast do its natural thing without us. And we need to start thinking about what we are building along those coastlines. As the Mayor has told me, going up and down our harbour in his boat, there are things that are built all over our cliffs and coast that really shouldn't have been put there. So it's up to us to start having those really hard conversations more often, and I think our communities are really starting to understand the changes that are happening due to climate change and these extreme weather events, and what we need to do to protect the things we love and maybe let things go and move closer inland. So just want to once again acknowledge the teams. I do not know how you have all that knowledge in your minds constantly, and the empathy with our communities when those hard conversations are coming up. And really want to thank our mana whenua partners who constantly work so hard on these shoreline adaptation plans to tell those stories, but work with our communities who may have sometimes different goals in mind. So kia ora, thank you committee members. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed. As a regional vote, opposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then that's the first one, and then all those in favour on the second one? Any opposed?
Opposed.
Cool. And Councillor
Please
Turner,
record my...
Yeah, Councillor Turner would like his vote recorded against both of those two. Kia ora. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to go for a 5-minute cup of tea break, stretch your legs, and come back in, well, let's just say 11:45, so 7 minutes.